Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Hope you enjoy yourself.
This is a tale of a goose whose envy provoked him to imitate the peacock in skin, but soon learned the lesson that each one is special with their unique qualities. Once upon a time, in the rolling green pastures of Willowbrook Farm, there lived a goose named Gerald. Now, Gerald wasn't just any goose, he was, in fact, a very ordinary goose. His feathers were as white as the others, his honk was as loud and nasal as every other goose's, and his waddle was just as clumsy. Nothing about Gerald stood out, and that bothered him deeply. Gerald longed to be admired, to be the center of attention, to be somebody. But as it stood, he was just another goose in the gaggle. His days were spent swimming in the farm pond, honking at passers-by, and pecking at scattered grains. It was a simple life, but Gerald craved something grand. One day, as he wandered past the barn, he spotted a creature that made his beak drop open in amazement. It was Percy, the farm's lone peacock. Percy was the epitome of elegance. His feathers shimmered in the sunlight with dazzling hues of green, blue, and gold. His long, graceful neck curved like a painter's brushstroke, and his tail fanned out like a royal banner, covered in dazzling eyes that shimmered with an almost magical quality. As Gerald watched, he saw the hens clucking in admiration. Even the farmer's wife, who hardly paid attention to any of the birds, tossed Percy extra seeds, smiling warmly. Gerald felt a pang of jealousy. That's what I need, he thought. If I looked like that, everyone would admire me too. And thus, a bold idea was born. Gerald would no longer be an ordinary goose, he would transform himself into a peacock. Gerald wasted no time. He started by addressing the most obvious problem, his color. Unlike Percy's jewel-toned feathers, Gerald's were plain white. That simply wouldn't do. He waddled over to the farmer's berry patch, where he found a cluster of juicy blackberries. Without hesitation, he rolled in them, covering himself in deep purple stains. Then, for a pop of extra color, he flopped into a pile of crushed tomatoes, smearing his chest with bright red. Stepping back, he admired his reflection in a mirror, then in a puddle. The effect was questionable. Instead of looking exotic and majestic, he looked like he had barely survived an unfortunate jam-making accident. Others mocked at him. Still, Gerald wasn't discouraged. Next, he needed a tail, a magnificent, fanned-out tail like Percy's. After searching the farm, he found a pile of old peacock feathers near the barn, ones Percy had naturally shed. Perfect. But how to attach them? After some thought, Gerald found a beehive hanging from an old oak tree. He had seen the farmer collecting honey before, surely. It was sticky enough to work as glue. This was, in hindsight, a terrible idea. Gerald pecked at the hive, causing an angry swarm of bees to chase him all the way back to the pond. After much frantic honking and flapping, he managed to dunk himself underwater just in time to avoid being stung. However, the good news was that he had managed to collect a good amount of honey on his feathers. Sticky and exhausted, he carefully pressed the peacock feathers to his tail. The result? A tail that almost resembled Percy's if Percy had been attacked by a raccoon and then assembled by a blindfolded farmer. Lastly, Gerald wanted to perfect his peacock call. He had never actually heard Percy's sound, but he assumed it must be as beautiful as the rest of him. Standing tall, he took a deep breath and let out the loudest, most elegant call he could muster. Unfortunately, What came out of his beak was a noise so ear-splittingly awful that even the farm scarecrow looked offended. It was a cross between a honk, a sneeze, and a squeaky door in need of oil. Despite everything, Gerald felt confident. He had done it. He had transformed into a peacock. He strutted towards the barnyard, ready to make his grand entrance. The moment he arrived, the other animals turned to stare. The hens froze mid-peck. The cows stopped chewing. Even the sheep, who were usually oblivious to everything, blinked in confusion. Then, Percy the peacock stepped forward. He examined Gerald up and down, tilting his head. "Gerald," he said slowly, "what are you doing?" "I am a peacock," Gerald announced proudly, shaking his makeshift tail. There was silence. Then, Percy burst into laughter. The hens followed, cackling until they nearly toppled over. The cows chuckled in deep, throaty moos. Even the usually grumpy goat let out a wheezy giggle. Gerald frowned. "Why are you laughing?" Percy wiped a tear from his eye. "Because you're still just a goose covered in berries, honey, and terrible decisions." Gerald opened his beak to argue, but just then, the honey lost its stickiness, and the peacock feathers fell off one by one. The purple and red stains began to dry, making him look even more ridiculous. The final humiliation came when a gust of wind blew through the farm, leaving him looking like nothing more than a ruffled, sticky mess. Gerald sighed. He had failed. Defeated, he waddled back to the pond, wiping away the last bits of honey. But just as he was about to disappear behind the reeds, he heard a tiny voice. That was amazing. Gerald turned to see a group of little ducklings looking up at him in awe. "You were so funny," one said. "Can you teach us how to be as silly as you?" another quacked. Gerald blinked. "Like me." And that was when he realized he didn't need to be a peacock. He was already special, in his own, honky way. Moral of the story: it's easy to think that being someone else, someone fancier, someone flashier will bring you happiness or admiration. But in the end, pretending to be something you're not only leads to exhaustion, disappointment, and, metaphorically, a swarm of bees. True confidence comes not from imitation but from self-acceptance. Gerald spent so much time trying to impress others that he overlooked the qualities that made him special. He didn't need to be a peacock to stand out, his unique personality was enough. Sometimes, the things we perceive as flaws or quirks are what make us interesting, lovable, and even admirable to others. So, rather than spending your time trying to be someone you're not, embrace who you are. You might just discover that your own honk is more valuable than you ever realized.
Thanks for watching and enjoying our inspiring videos. If you like our stories, do pull in your likes and wonderful comments about your views. Also, don't forget to subscribe now for more interesting content. Have a nice day. Let's meet again soon. Take care.